As First Light finally made its way across the area that would be our battlefield, I thought about how we had sent a messenger to let them know that there was a certain symbol that our people would be wearing to show that they are non-combatants and only there to save lives. This would be the simple white armband with a vertical and horizontal red on it, to signify that they are there simply to save lives, to unstack bodies, if you would, instead of stacking them up, as there would be enough bodies piled across the land today. With this, I hoped against hope that they would adhere to this, though I didn't trust them for nothing. Because of that, I made sure my gear, even though off me, as I needed to get my arms as free as possible, was stacked up in the corner, easy that I could put it on very, very quickly and be on the battlefield in just a few seconds. They call a Minuteman for a reason, but around here, a minute is too long. Inside the canvas that had been set up to be our own mobile Army surgical hospital, I looked across the staff as making final preparations, as we knew we would be very, very busy today. I made sure everyone understood their assignments. Those that had healing magic and those that had been well versed by my training would be staying. The rest would be acting as medics, going out, grabbing who they could, more often than not, simply throwing a tourniquet on and grabbing the wounded and bringing them back. I got a lot of flack from this, as the king showed very little interest in those who had been wounded on the battlefield. In his own words, well, actually the words that were whispered in his ear by one of his associates, "The wounded are weak and do not deserve to live." I looked at him and asked, "Then why do you need a healer? Maybe I should just leave." That threat was not going to last for too much longer if things keep going. The queen, of course, had her eyes open very wide at that point. So wide you would think she was American or something, as she turned to him and begged him to knock it off, to make sure that I was still around to maintain her youth and beauty, as nothing was more important to her at that point. I would figure her children, but then again, she was the queen after all. I looked out onto the battlefield as I saw everyone starting to get in their position. The infantry lines started, and one thing that was not common in their own world was a shield wall. I insisted on it. Those that had limited or no fighting skill at all, but were very strong, normally farmers, would hold these heavy shields. The shields were not actually super heavy, as they were mostly made of plywood, taking a key off ancient Rome. But I insisted on several different handholds, so that they could make sure that they were able to hold it as steadily as possible. This was going to be their defense against what was coming. Behind them, of course, was pikemen, archers, along with crossbows that, thankfully, Keen had been able to figure out very quickly once I drew it. Actually, he clicked on so much that I had to ask him if he had seen this type of weapon before. "Yes, but we have another name for them where I come from. A douche." "Well, I'm sure they're going to say that we using this is going to be pretty douchey, but hey, winning's winning at this point." He didn't understand what I meant, but didn't matter. I was just chuckling as I left at that point. As I sent our medics towards the field, I looked and the next line was beginning to form. This would be those who are manning the crew serve weapons, mostly catapults, trebuchets, and the occasional cannon. They did have black powder in this world, but it wasn't smokeless powder like I'm using, no. These were very large, very heavy, and very short-range type of cannons. They wouldn't actually be of much use. In actuality, they did fire farther than a standard trebuchet does, but they take forever to reload. And of course, accidents do happen, and if one of these things blows too early because some idiot forgot to extinguish all the extra embers, you wouldn't have a cannon crew, that's for sure. Hell, you wouldn't even have a cannon. There wouldn't be anything left. Regardless of that, everything lined up exactly the way they were supposed to. I looked over, and one of the princes was still on his high horse, quite literally. The tallest horse they could find, although to me it wasn't much more than a pony. It was extremely rare to have horses, and they, again, were kept more for royalty to show, well, dominance and wealth. I thought, hey, get off that horse, you asshole. How about you join the fight? But I didn't have time to worry about that, as the battle lines were clearly being formed rapidly. With this, I saw that several other lines were being set up. These were more support units than anything else. Those that would rush in to give extra arrows. Those that would hurry up and reload the cannons and the trebuchets. Things of that nature. Along with that, we had our flankers on either side. The battle itself would be terrible. Absolutely terrible as both lines got ready. I looked way off in the distance and I saw something that caught my eye on the horizon. Something I hadn't noticed before. So as I had a lull as everything was getting ready, I went over to my assault pack and pulled out my binos. Focusing the binoculars, I went across the tree line and I saw several creatures coming out of the tree line. That was odd. Why did they have creatures? Cryptids, stuff like that. But that wasn't what I was trying to look for. I looked high on the very top of the tree line and moved across, and then I saw something I wasn't expecting. There was a tower. Great. What the hell do they need a siege tower out here? We don't have any large defenses. Wait a minute. Hold on. I tried to look closer. That looks like stone. What moron makes a siege tower out of stone? That thing's going to be too heavy to move. Seriously, what the hell is wrong? And just as I focused down towards the ground again, I started to see what we were going to be fighting against. And they didn't all look, well, unhuman. Some of them did. I wasn't sure what I was looking at, and immediately turned to the one next to me. Hey, I thought we weren't fighting humans here. We're not, he says. I said, well then tell me about this, as I hand the binos to him, suddenly realizing he has no idea what I'm holding. I simply showed him how to use it and looked down. He was amazed that he could see so far with such a simple device. And I said, okay, now answer my question. Are those human? Oh no, Doc, those are absolutely not human. Well, what are they? Those are elves. Nasty things. Elves are nasty things. What? I wasn't ready for this, although I wasn't really asking about too much of the enemy itself. I figured it would come at us in some sort of nasty horde full of orcs and all sorts of piggy-looking things. I didn't know, didn't really care. But then I took the binos back and I saw something else. Other things didn't look like elves in armor, but they looked like, again, these look like humans. I looked and they looked female. What? Really? They're going to put other women in there? I know we have women in that were summoned, but the majority of everyone else was simply men. Strong men. The best strong men we could find. Mostly farmers. What the hell is going on? But I didn't have time. As each line began to get ready, we saw the envoys from each side go up to each other. I'm assuming to offer some sort of terms. Usually that of surrender and subjugation. With that, I saw the other side, but I couldn't hear what they were saying, not by a long shot, as they were easily a half a kilometer out. It was hard to see, but most of them came up on horseback, of all things. I thought this was a noble human thing. What the fuck? They looked at each other, and I could see hand gestures, but mostly all they did was talk. Then they stopped, and they turned around away from each other. Our side first, waving something in his hand, some sort of white and red flag. It was strange, and I looked, and no, it wasn't white and red. It had a black to it. The hell was that for? With that, everyone started to get in their locked positions. The shield wall formed and got ready. On the other side, I could hear screams and howls from all sorts of creatures. I looked a little closer to my binos, and I could see... Wait a minute. They're different colors. There wasn't just green. I figured goblins, sure, maybe they were brown. I looked, what the fuck, that looks almost human-shaped. Something in armor, but there seemed to be two purple horns coming out the top. I looked over, there was another one that was dark blue, again with horns coming out. Another one that had black horns coming out, but the thing seemed red. What the fuck am I looking at? I didn't have time to worry about it, as I had a tap on my shoulder. Doc, the battle is starting soon. Please be ready. Yeah, I got it. Alright. I put my binos away, and it wasn't hard to see what was beginning to happen. The opposing side didn't seem to have many archers, many crew-served weapons, or anything like that. So as the catapults, the trebuchets, the scorpions, the bows, and everything opened up, They simply raised a cloth. What? Why are they wearing cloaks? What the fuck? What's going on? I couldn't see very well as I put my binoculars away, but they charged our lines. With that, it didn't take long for a few of their number to start dropping like crazy, and eventually they got close enough where several of our weapons were simply punching through their cloaks no matter how much they swung them left and right to try and deflect our ballistics. The scorpion bolts will go right through without even a care and straight in, sometimes piercing them, locking them right to the ground. As I watched a few of them writhe in pain, I worried about what my folks would be going through. And as the shield wall was crashed into, I could see very large creatures come running through the trees. They had been using the trees as some sort of cover, some sort of camouflage, and they were very, very large. I didn't know if they were minotaurs, I didn't know if they were orcs, I didn't really give a shit. They could have been golems for all I know. All I know is if they crashed into that shield wall, the shield wall wasn't going to be there. To my absolute shock, I saw a huge wall of ice begin to rise up in front of the shield wall. It must have been 10 feet thick and rose up a good 20 feet into the air. I looked over and I could see the slight blue tinge coming from Line. She was using all her power, everything she could, to form an ice wall in front of the shields. I don't know why she did that. Somebody must have told her to do that, but why? That doesn't make sense. We need them to attack from the front. Oh, you friggin' moron. I looked over close, and sure enough, the wonderful prince had decided this would be a good use of her powers. Oh, you frickin' moron. With that, I saw the shield wall, confused what was going to happen. They didn't know what was going on. But eventually, those large creatures crashed into the ice and cracked it. The shield wall wavered a little bit, but I could hear them yelling at each other, trying to stay where they were. I started worrying, because if the ice fell, it would break the shield wall. It was there for a reason. What was he thinking? That moron. Immediately, I could see Shara and Xena bouncing back and forth from the prince to the front lines, using their teleportation to actually get back and forth and deliver messages. We didn't have any communications, so this was the best they had, and this was a great way of using their power. They were actually told to back the shield wall up a little bit from the ice. As I was screaming at them, that ice is going to break, that ice is going to break. Well, apparently I wasn't the only one screaming. And they realized that the large chunks that were being knocked off the other side were starting to be flung over. They realized the shield wall needed some room. And with that, the shield wall began to back up slowly, trying to stay shoulder to shoulder, just as the way they were. As I watched this happen, I looked up to the sky and I saw Trezek and Reniza were making their circles, looping around with that angel-looking female. They were going around and around in circles, just waiting for their time, waiting for their call. It's a good thing too, because now was not the time. Around each side, I wondered where Meadow and Leaf were. I made sure that they were stationed on opposite sides to make sure nobody was flanked. Their ultra senses would be needed for this extensively. Rena was back with me as a fourth line to make sure that if anything did happen, they could create a divide in the earth, making sure that there was ample time for everyone to escape. Along with next to me was Hana, although I wasn't sure what the hell her hypnosis could do against a group that large. I understand she is large, she is powerful, but in a large setting, with many, many people running around, her snake body would be more of a cumbersome. She would be more likely to strike at her own people than actually strike at the enemy. So she was simply back behind the lines. I hoped that she would be of some use. I did worry so much about this, but I didn't have time to worry. As the shield wall backed up from what I could see, maybe 20 feet, the ice wall broke and fell down. The creatures on the other side, in a mad rage, started to go over top of the ice. They began to jump and climb over, but as they did, arrows and the rearmed catapults began to fire, and they just started to go down in droves. They started dropping like crazy, and I just did not envy what was going on. I saw another one of the large ones, whatever the hell it was, jump the ice wall, land in front of the shield wall, and start bashing at it. The shields may be strong, but those behind them only can take so much hits. With that, Holes began to open up in the shield wall, but when it went to raise its club up to make another strike, it was hit again with a flurry of arrows and bolts from the scorpions, and down it went, falling on its own kin. The pile of blood I could see that squirted out was visible even from where I was. With that, we could see that a few arrows started to come back towards the other side. The shield wall simply formed a turtle and was able to make sure they didn't get struck, but the second line was starting to take hits. With that, I saw my medics get to work. I saw their small white band around their arms. I saw them run up, grabbing another one, and immediately started to bring them over. Not only that, but taking all sorts of care and doing first aid right then and there. Their job was simple. Keep them as alive as possible for as long as possible and get them back as fast as possible. That is their job, nothing else. Well, that and don't get hit. As the first few started to make it towards the tent, it wasn't as bad as I thought. A couple were struck in the torso, which did take some doing, having to get somebody to hold them down as I ripped the bolt out from inside of them as they screamed, and immediately using my magic to seal up the wound. This only took maybe about a minute once we got them on the table, and I stressed the maybe part because I was getting good at this shit. But it wasn't long before we were starting to get overrun with the amount of injured. I told the ones outside to do their triage, what I taught them to do. Bring us the most critically wounded as fast as possible. Anybody with a tourniquet as well. We needed them now. And off they went. Off they went into the battle. Into the projectiles flying back and forth. Because now they got nasty. Now they brought some folks up with armor. And I was too busy. I didn't hear what was going on, but I could see that more and more of the shield wall crew was beginning to be brought in. I realized that the front line was starting to get crunched, but I didn't have time. My job was to heal. My job was not to be on the front line giving orders, but I knew that Prince, whatever he was doing, he was fucking up by the numbers. Just by the numbers. And as I found another one with a sword actually stuck through his entire torso, he begged for me to save him. I looked him square in the eye and said, "Look, I can't hypnotize you, but I can only tell you this once. This is gonna hurt." "What?" And I ripped the sword out as hard as I could, and then immediately put my hands on both sides and began to close him up. He thrashed around so much I worried if I could hold him down, and then Hana actually showed up and coiled him up, holding him down, and then looking into his eyes, and immediately he was still. Well, what do you know? I happen to have a nurse. I looked at her and simply nodded and said thanks, and then we got back to work with the next one. She immediately yoinked this guy off the table, and another one was brought up so I could continue my work. I realized that the battle was turning into a stalemate. The flanks were constantly being hammered, but thanks to our wonderful awareness from Leaf and Meadow, our cat girls, they were never able to take a direct advantage. And eventually, before the day was over, the battle that had lasted hours, as there was an ebb and a flow each time that one side thought they were taking an advantage, and the other side would try to push them back. Eventually, we did win the day. We scored a victory and took the field itself. But as the wounded started to dwindle down, I had to take a break. I was just getting so tired. I looked over and a few others brought me water as fast as they could, and I chugged it down, even though at one point I spit it out. It tasted terrible. I didn't care. I needed some hydration. I needed something. For the first time, I actually reached into my bag for a ration and then realized, wait a minute, they left me something here. I went and opened up the piece of leather, and there it was, a big piece of liver. I immediately shoved it down my throat, barely chewing it, just trying to get some sort of chemical, some sort of energy into my body, as I had drained almost everything during the battle. I told them I needed to take a break. Call, just get a hold of me if somebody comes in you can't handle. As most everyone left was simple lacerations or head trauma. Somebody who was actually ready to bleed out, they needed to get a hold of me. I whistled over so I could at least get Xena over so she could teleport me towards the front. She was completely exhausted, breathing extremely heavy. I looked at her and said, "Don't worry. I'll just go there myself." She looked at me and she said, "Oh, hell no." And then hugged me, and then zoink, we were towards the front lines. I looked over and everyone was surprised to see me there. I wasn't surprised at the look, but what I was surprised at was the fact that there were bodies all over the ground. People had not been picked up. What the hell? But what really twisted my balls into a knot was something I saw Captain Smenak doing. To my horror, he was going around the battlefield, shoving that sword of his across someone's neck and slicing. Wasn't even giving them the dignity of just shoving the blade through their heart. No, the bastard was slicing their throat and letting them gurgle, taking a seemingly delight in this. I screamed, "What the hell are you doing?" And he looked at me, and he had that look in his eyes, the look of someone who enjoyed killing and was in ecstasy as he killed another, shoving his blade into the neck of an elf that was right next to him, one that was simply groaning on the ground. I ran over as fast as I could and shoved him over. "What the hell's wrong with you?" I reached down, put my hand on his neck, and began to close the wound. Immediately he raised his sword, and I looked at him and said, "Go ahead and try it. See where it gets you." He paused for just a moment, and with that he realized that if he struck me down, he would have hell to pay, as the king, and especially the queen, would want him hung, but previously to hanging, they would have him castrated. He wouldn't want that. I was far too valuable. I looked over at the elf. The elf seemed to be okay. I ran a scan through its body, and I realized that this elf was hundreds of years old. What the fuck? Okay, well, that's actually right for an elf, but why does this elf look so young? I thought elves actually aged, but whatever. I didn't have time to think about it. I screamed for the medics to patch up all the wounded. Didn't matter if they were friendly or enemy. They looked at me strange for a while, and I just said, "Do it!" They were not taking any chances with me being pissed off like that, especially since the captain had still his raised arm up with his sword in his hand. I got up, got in his face, said, "If I see you killing prisoners one more time, I'm going to kill you myself. These are simple creatures. They don't deserve the right to live. They are the enemy. They were going to take us over." Really? Well, for right now, they're my patients, and you are trying my patience. He didn't quite understand what I was saying, but he realized what I really meant by looking at my eyes. He backed away and told his knights to go back towards the second line. Along with the shields, they realized that the battle was over. They didn't have to be out there. Me and the rest of the medics worked as fast as we could, and immediately I tried to bring as many of the wounded back to the tent as possible, those that needed to be saved. It didn't matter if they were friendly or enemy. If they were friendly, they would just move back to the line. If they were enemy, they would be guarded as prisoners of war. That is the way it was going to happen. Then the wonderful prince showed up and demanded to know what the hell I was doing, why I was betraying them. Betraying them? I'm healing people. This is what I do. "You will listen to me. You will let them die." I just looked at him and said, "No, and you tell me to do that again, I will shoot you right off your high horse." "You do not have the capacity to do anything to me. I am above you, and you will know that. You are simply a subordinate, simple summons. You are nothing to us, but simply a healer." Yeah, and a healer is going to heal. As I got up and moved to the next one, as the prisoner I had just healed sat up, trying to figure out how they had survived. With that, I went over to another one. This time, it was another kitsune. I was actually surprised to see this. I thought they didn't have any of these inside their own world. The fuck? I went up to her, and she was in a bad way. Lost an arm, laceration on the leg, and it looks like she took one hell of a hit on the head. The only reason she hadn't bled out is that somebody had dropped onto her missing arm, squeezed off the artery just enough where she didn't bleed out. But she would be low on blood for a long time. With that, I screamed out for Shara as she was close by, and I asked, "Do you know this one?" She looked close and didn't know for a second. Then, as I was regenerating the arm, she picked up the face and turned it. "Oh my greatness goddess!" "What?" This. With my free hand, I slapped her across the face. "This is what?" "This is my niece." "Your what?" "This is my... They have summons. They have summons. What?" She immediately dropped down and tried to wake up her cousin, but I was still in the middle of healing her. I had to tell her, "Hey, stop shaking her. I'm working on here." She started to freak out completely, and still the prince screamed for us to stop. I simply turned to him as I was finishing up with that cassone, but the thing is, I hadn't fixed her head, so she was still out cold. I stood up, drew my pistol, cocked the hammer back, and said, "Say that one more time. I fucking dare you." This time, the captain immediately went for his sword, but before he drew it out, I swung over and shot him right in the face, dropping his sorry ass right there. "Asshole," I said, as the body hit the ground. "You don't draw from the drop, moron." He was not one I would heal. Not one that I would resurrect. This guy had shown that he's just a douche. I spun the weapon back around to the prince, and for the first time, I'm sure in his entire life, he showed fear. The hammer was back on this 45, and he realized all I had to do was put any pressure on this trigger, and he wouldn't be breathing anymore. With that, the prince simply moved the reins, turned the horse, and rode away. I put the hammer back and then put my pistol back in its holster and went back to work. I got Shara's niece back up and running, but she was confused, which is not surprising considering the head trauma. I didn't have time to talk to her as I was on to the next one, and realized very quickly that they had many of the same types of folks. I even saw one of these snake girls, the Lamias, who was here. I was like, what the hell is one doing here? What the flying fuck knuckles is this? Nothing I could do for her. She had been eviscerated, literally sliced about 4 feet from her shoulder all the way down into her tail. The wound so deep, I swear I could see her vertebrae. Unfortunately, I had to keep moving, and I was getting very, very tired. I realized that my energy reserves were again starting to reach their absolute limit, and I couldn't stop. I started saying what every good medic would say in that situation. "Oh Lord, just one more. One more. Just one more." Each time I healed one, they sat up, and they were brought over to the POW area. "Just one more. Just one more." The medics heard this, and I could see that they moved with more urgency as they started to run out of their own materials and started to rip off part of their own fabric just to make makeshift tourniquets so that everyone survived. And as the blazing moon was overhead, I was still going, basically doing a grid pattern as we all worked our way forward through the bodies. When we finally reached the other side, those that had been hit with the heavy stuff, the trebuchets, the catapults, the cannons, the scorpions, it had been way too late and there was nothing any of us could do. I still kept saying, "One more. Just one more. Just one." And that was the last thing I remembered until I woke up inside the tent, leaning up against my gear. I jumped awake immediately, reaching for everything. I grabbed my rifle, picked it up, and started moving around. Up on my knee, I moved left to right, looking around to see everybody, but safety was clicked off. And then I came back to reality. Okay, I'm in the medic tent. I put the safety back on. Checked the weapon itself. Checked the magazine. Yep, fully loaded. I did a quick press check. Okay, I'm good to go here. Snapping the magazine back in place, I went to get up and realized something was off. Where's my pistol? Where is my pistol? Is all I said. As I stood up, nobody wanted to answer. Where is my pistol? As I tapped my thigh. One of them simply pointed in the direction. Fucking Prince. Oh, jeez. As I walked over with the rifle in front of me, I could see he was playing with a pistol, moving it around, just admiring it. Yo, princess, hand me back that. This belongs to me now. You do not deserve such a weapon. I raised my rifle, snapped the safety off, and said, unless you want to eat something that hurts a lot more, drop it. He stood there, just confounded. This would be twice I pulled a weapon on him. Twice I had my finger on the trigger. I will let you know now, there will not be a third time. He looked at me strangely. Looked at the weapon. He's like, this thing here, this magic item you carry. You say it is science, you say it is technology, you say it needs logistics to operate, which means it will eventually run out. How do I know it's not run out now? Tell you what, put the barrel against your head and squeeze the trigger and find out. He must have thought I was joking. He actually put it to his head, squeezed the trigger, and I watched his brains blow out the side of that stupid helmet he was wearing. As he slid off the horse, I ran over to see if there was anything I can do. I did as much as I could with my magic, but there's only so much I can do. I had to focus as much as possible, as brain injuries are the most difficult to deal with, those and spinal cord injuries. It took a lot to put him back together. A lot. In fact, I was there for a good 20 minutes making sure he didn't just stop. The force of it had blown most of his brains across the entire courtyard. But, hey, that's what happens when you do stupid shit, you win stupid prizes. Though I was able to keep him alive, the fact of the matter is, he had lost almost all of his memories, almost all of his intelligence. He had lost almost everything. He was not much more than an infant at that point. Though we would get him back to his castle, he would need a lot of attention for a few years until he relearned how to walk, relearned how to talk, and hopefully not relearn how to be a dumbass. As his own guards took him away, they warned us that the Queen and King are not going to be happy about this. I just looked at him as I picked up my pistol and slammed it back in his holster. No shit. As I turned back to the tent, I saw that there were still people that needed my help, and I immediately got back to work. This time, I simply slung the weapon across my back and got to work, as I didn't trust anybody to try to steal something and then blast themselves. I looked over as I worked, and I could see a few of my teammates were passed out. My two Konsunes, Zena and Shara, were both completely out. Renizia and Terzak had burned a lot of their energy keeping the flanks safe. I had no idea where Keen was, but I had to figure he was over with the catapults and everything else, making sure everything was in working order. Our two cat girls were okay. Meadow and Leaf just kind of were abouts. Their powers don't burn a lot of energy unless they're trying to concentrate a lot, and they didn't have to. Moving in large groups like that, it's easy for their ultra awareness, ultra senses to kick in and figure it out. Hana was still inside the tent, trying to make sure everybody was calm. Thankfully, that hypnosis actually helped them out a lot. People stopped screaming with fear. Rena, I had no idea where she was. And to my absolute surprise, Line, well, she was helping us out, but I would say she was tired and dead to the world, but honestly, as pale as she is, I swear, it's hard to tell. It's really hard to tell. I know she burned a lot of energy making that ice wall, which she shouldn't have made in the first place. But still, It's there. With that, I actually got a surprise. Lee showed up from the battlefield and used his mediocre healing abilities, since he had focused over 80% of his stuff into his fighting skills, to help us out. I thanked him profusely for this, but still, it would have been nice to have another set of hands earlier. The other grand healers that were native to this world had pretty much burned their magic completely out and were limited to using first aid equipment to try and patch people up. A few of them had actually learned how to stitch, which was great, but this would be leaving a lot of scars, which we'd have to deal with later. I worried about this. I also worried the fact that even though we won, losing the prince was going to be something. Although I wouldn't have to worry about that too much. Before the day was up, the second prince had shown up. He seemed a lot more confident, and that worried me. Great, another arrogant asshole. He simply walked over to me, simply removed his helmet, which I was surprised, and stuck his hand out to shake my hand. He's seen me do this before. I didn't know this was going to be a sign of respect. I told him I would shake your hand, but as you can see, my hands are busy. Are you good? You're not hurt, are you? No, I am not hurt. I simply wish to convey my thanks for all your work. You and your compatriots that sneer, that look he gave as most of my non-human brethren were either still trying to help out even though they were exhausted or were passed out against the tree. I worried about them still. You mean my allies? Your allies? Yes, of course. One thing though, I wondered why my brother is now a simpleton. Well, that's what happens when he shoots himself in the head. I looked down at my pistol. Yes, I heard. I heard that he was quite arrogant. Yeah, arrogant, that's putting it mildly. I immediately pulled my hands off as I was done. I slapped the guy, told him to move, and I got the next person in. As I started working on this one, which was a semi-serious neck wound, I continued to talk. Look, he had no idea tactically what he was doing, and this guy thought he was, God's gift to the battlefield. He forced one of my friends to burn up so much energy she almost passed out and almost screwed up the entire battle plan. If he had listened to us, we wouldn't have taken even half of these casualties. That may be true, but now you have a much better commander. Yeah, we'll see, I said, not even bothering to look at him. With that, he simply excused himself and left, although he did end up stepping on Hana's tail on the way out. I wondered if this was deliberate or not, but I didn't have time to worry about it. She simply screamed, "Hey!" and hissed at him. Okay, whatever. I didn't have time to worry about it. I still had people to deal with. Before the next 2 days was up, not only had we healed everybody, but we had started to make plans for the prisoners of war. I went over to see what was going on, and several of them were, species that shouldn't be native to this world. This was odd. This was very odd. But the messed up part was when I went over to Shara, she was talking to her niece, and now I just wanted to get some answers. Seriously, what was going on? Shara introduced me to her niece, who turned out to be named Goyle, of all things. I kind of chuckled at this because, if you understand original English, you would know why it was just funny. Regardless of that, I asked her exactly what was going on. And as she was talking, I would always be interrupted by one of their knights or samurai, whatever the fuck you want to call them. I was getting so irritated, I looked at one and said, "Unless you want to end up like the prince, back off. I'm talking to someone here." I looked over at Goyle and said, "Okay, tell me what's going on. How did you get here?" "Well, we were summoned here, a whole bunch of us, and we were told to be ready because another group would be coming to take us down, take our kingdom, or take their kingdom, and then if we survived and were able to take them down, then we would be able to go home." Yeah, this doesn't sound familiar at all, I thought. With that, Shara shot me a look of knowing. Something I knew exactly what she was thinking. I asked Doyle to continue, to say what was going on. And to summarize, she simply was told that she would have to fight alongside the native monsters of this world. Certain things that every once in a while would leak into ours. Summoning works both ways, of course. Not as though someone had to be summoning, but somebody could actually push creatures out of our world. Or out of theirs into ours, however you want to look at it. It's something that actually made my head start to hurt until I started thinking in 4 dimensions. That must be how the portals work. 4th dimensions, but I don't know why it takes so long unless they need a shit ton of energy to do it. She started to explain that they had limited training and that they were simply sent out. It seems as though the humans that were in charge didn't really like their kind. I looked around at the prisoners and realized there wasn't a human among them. The closest you had was a bunch of what appeared to me to be high elves, most of them with blonde hair and blue eyes, one of which I walked over and actually put my hand on his face. He was scared shitless when I did that, and then I regenerated his eye for him, which, in all honesty, once you learn how, is very simple to do. And once I removed my hand, he was all smiles, as he believed himself to be completely disfigured. Boy, the vanity of elves is a big deal. I went back to Shara and asked Goyle, why all this? Why do you think? I don't know. All I know is I came through the portal and I was like this. How did this happen? I mean, I'm not mad. I just want to know how it happened. I simply looked at her and asked, you mind if I look into your genetic code a little bit? My what? Can I look in to see what happened to you? And I raised my hand out. She's like, okay. And she reached out and put her hand in mine. I began to scan her DNA. And sure enough, whatever the summoning does, it makes you younger. I don't know why, but it makes you younger. This young fox girl in front of me couldn't have looked more than 14 years old. Turned out she was an actual adult when they sucked her through. I was like, what in the ever-loving... Oh, great, we all get to go through puberty twice. That's nice. After looking through that, I had to pull away and get my thoughts together. I had full intentions of bringing together all my different brethren that I had under my charge and let them know what was actually going on, but I didn't have a choice. Before I knew it, the new captain of the guard was already screaming for everybody to start moving. The assault on the castle will begin soon. Assault on a castle? I thought we were trying to stop an invasion. He didn't even respond. Forward! We all move out now! Oh, what the... Before I even had a chance to even say anything, they were pulling up the stakes and pulling down my mobile army surgical hospital. Great. I wish I had some sort of wisecrack to say right now. But whatever. I looked over and I could see that most everybody was trying to refill their A-bags as soon as possible. I still hadn't used my own personal IFAC, but I'm pretty sure if I pulled out a jar of Quick Clot, they'd probably shit themselves seeing how it worked. But regardless of that, it was time to go. Grabbing my gear, putting it on, and following everybody, I tried to look around to find everybody who was supposed to be with me. I ran over and grabbed the girls who were asleep as they were about to be left behind. I looked to see who was guarding the prisoners, and they had a pretty large group. I ran over to the side and told Shara that if you can, stay here, keep an eye on things. Let me know if something goes off. Well, what about the front? I will worry about the front. They can do without you. This is an assault on a castle, not a... It's a static defense or attack. Just don't worry about it. Okay, okay. I reached down really close to her ear and whispered, just, if anything goes wrong, anything, come and get me. Save your power. Just think of where I am. I don't care what I'm doing. Just come and get me, okay? She looked confused at my concern at this, but this was a medieval Asian era, so I had to worry a bit more about what in the flying fuckknuckles was going to happen. We made our way down. I basically had to run to catch up to everybody, as they were trying desperately to get up to the front lines. Before I even realized it, the trebuchets, the catapults, and everything else had already begun to fire. Boy, you guys were in one hell of a hurry. As I saw the rocks and everything hit, I looked at the walls. The walls were really thick and really high. This was a big castle. It takes a long time to get all the materials and get all this stuff laid out. How did they take a castle like this? The walls seem untouched, except for anything that our own people have already damaged. Nothing about this situation is right. It shouldn't be going this way. And as I watched as Reniza and Trzek dove towards the wall, striking them with their lightning and heat magic, setting everything ablaze, and watching everyone on the turrets running for their lives, all I could say is, no, this can't be, no, oh, those sneaky bastards. And just as I realized things had gone from bad to worse, I realized things had gone from worse to, oh, fuck me, as I saw a giant shadow move across the landscape, and my eyes looked up to see an image that I thought I had imagined before. I screamed for the girls to look out, and they turned and with fear in their eyes banked away as hard as they could as the giant dragon descended towards the castle.